At 7:19, the case against John Wiley Price is likely to go to a jury today, Hal.
Pretty quick, it seems like. Pretty quick.
Find out what we should expect and how this might go as we turn to a criminal defense attorney, Chris Lewis. He's with the law firm of Crane, Lewis, and Brogdon. Good morning, Chris. How do you expect this to go, and the length that the jury takes, the amount of time that the jury takes with this case, what should that tell us, if anything?
Well, the length really, the only thing it's going to tell us how long they deliberate is whether or not they are carefully considering each count. This is I think a 12 or a 13 count indictment. It took Judge Lynn 45 minutes just to read the court's charge. So I think what they'll do is they'll get back there, they'll elect a foreperson, and then they will go through each count individually and determine whether or not there's a consensus as to whether he's John Wiley Price and Daphne Fain, whether they are guilty or not guilty to each individual count. I think that's at least going to be their plan from the outset.
The defense didn't take long with their side of it. They really didn't. They, according to them, didn't need much time. How badly, if at all, did the prosecution bungle their case in their presentation?
You know, they certainly could have presented a cleaner case. Anytime that you have the court having to chastise one side or the other because they haven't turned over evidence, even as insignificant as it may be, I know that the jury is not supposed to be reading newspapers, talking to family members about the case. I just don't know, unless you sequester the jury, how you prevent that from happening. So I think at least some of the members of the jury are probably aware of some of the problems that the prosecution was going to have. I think it's going to affect them. But I listened to the prosecution's closing argument, and there is just a ton of circumstantial evidence in this case that the jury has to sift through.
Hey, when we come back to you, Chris, Brett Shipp from Channel 8 last night said the prosecution was very lame, to paraphrase, on their closing arguments, and the defense was spot on.
Right now at WBAP, 68 degrees.
Chris Lewis is with Crane, Lewis, and Brogdon defense attorneys. Chris, two questions here. Did you hear the closing arguments? And if you did, who won?
Yeah, I heard the closing arguments, and getting back to what Brett said, I think that's true. I don't think that it tells the entire story. I would have to say that the defense won as far as the closing arguments are concerned, but in telling the whole story, the prosecution has to go through all of the mundane, meticulous facts in order to prove their case. They've got the burden of proof, and quite frankly, listening to the closing argument was like watching paint dry. When the defense gets up there, they're able to focus on people. They're able to focus on ideas, the idea that the government didn't prove their case, and in this country, mere suspicion is not enough to convict somebody of a criminal case, and I think that they did that very well.
And so if you're going to weigh this and you're going to put $1 on it, do you think that Mr. Price is going to walk here?
I think they're going to split the baby. What they've done on the tax evasion counts, essentially, I think, is they've built in a safety net. How does John Wiley Price explain the fact that there's approximately $1.1 million of supposedly taxable income that was never reported, that was never told to his accountant? It doesn't appear on any 1040 whatsoever. But I don't think that's I don't think that's the reason why the government brought this case. If they only get him on the tax counts, I think that's a win for John Wiley Price.
And what will that penalty be?
I think it's up to 3 years in prison. I think the sentencing would go to Judge Lynn. It depends on the way Judge Lynn sees it and how she's able to factor in what the appropriate sentence is based upon how John Wiley Price has lived his life and all the factors that are relevant in sentencing.
Final question: Did the prosecutors blow it? With all, in my opinion, thanks for asking. If it takes a judge 45 minutes to read all things that have been brought against him, I'm going to be a confused idiot sitting on the bench in about 10 minutes.
I think this should have been an easier case to try and to win. $1.1 million of what the defense is calling a loan and what the prosecution is calling illegal payments to pay for his vote. All you have to do is get in there and throw strikes.
Yeah.
And I think that they made their job a lot tougher than it needed to be.
Thank you, sir, for being on with us. Chris Lewis, appreciate it a lot. Morning news at 7:26. Marlee has a 7:30 news next.